So good morning, everyone. Thank you very much all for joining us. This is our Protiviti and Robert Half Collaboration Forum. This is week 3 of our 2021 series, and it's great to be back here to collaborate with you and to be inspired by you all once again. My name's Paul Middleton. I'm a Managing Director in Protiviti, and I'm joined here today by my colleagues from Protiviti, as well as by my colleagues from our sister company, Robert Half. Over the next 2 months, we promise you another terrific set of debates on a range of topics that will hopefully invigorate, challenge and inspire us all, and that are designed to bring us optimism in these tough times. For those of you new to our forums, we started these back in March of last year with the intention of creating a regular forum for business leaders where, in the face of the challenges, the disruptions and the uncertainties you all face, you could talk to each other, learn from each other, challenge each other, and gain confidence from each other's perspectives. 10 months have passed, and the challenges, the disruption, the uncertainty remains, and are arguably even greater. With lockdown 3, new COVID variants, hospitals stretched more than we can imagine, and a vaccine programme struggling to take hold in some areas, the health of the UK PLC is more precarious than ever. Combine this with Brexit, political turmoil, and the gloom of a lockdown winter, and it's easy to lose perspective. So this is our series 4. We wanted to bring you renewed perspective, fresh insight, and a healthy dose of confidence and optimism, as we still believe that within this adversity, with collaboration and the right mindset, lies opportunity for us all. To unlock this optimism and opportunity, we need to be bold and we need to be different. And a common thread that has run through all of our forums, and it's been a rallying cry for us here, is that now is the time to think differently and to be actioning both those big and small ideas. Put differently, if we don't drive change and innovation during this continued period of disruption, we run the risk of rapidly becoming irrelevant. So to help you do this, we'll be bringing you new speakers and new inspirators each week to kick off the debate. In the following weeks, we have Paralympians, CEOs, innovators, disruptors, entrepreneurs, and many others who are driving visions and positive change, and all of whom will share perspectives that you can react to. And react is really what we want you to do. This is deliberately not a closed forum, and unlike some webinars you may have joined, you're not permanently muted or expected to be a silent participant. This is a collaboration forum. We want you to be here to be part of the debate, to hear your voice and learn from your insights in the true spirit of collaboration. To get involved, you can raise your hand in the Teams button in the right-hand corner and I'll come to you. And hopefully you can write your thoughts in the chat. Although, as Liz has pointed out, there may be some trouble with that, but please try. And if you can't, you'll see a number in the chat that you can send through your questions through to. But if you're just bursting with energy at this time in the morning, you can take yourself off mute and interrupt and let us know what you have to say. But please get involved, as it's infectious and it's the whole purpose of this hour. So without further ado, I'm delighted to introduce you to our lead inspirator for this week, Josh Valman. Josh is a world leader in rapid innovation and manufacturing. He's the founder and CEO of RPD International, a business powering corporate R&D departments around the world. Josh began his engineering career in robotics, entering the TV show Robot Wars. He went on to work in China, developing manufacturing facilities and helping major corporates reduce their cost and restructure supply chains while he was still at school. Founding RPD in 2012, his company operates a global supply chain of 100+ factories in 40 different countries around the world. With innovation and disruptive thinking at the heart of what they do, RPD asks what might happen to the world if companies had the ability to launch, test and develop products in weeks instead of years. With this culture and mindset, Josh and his team have worked with the likes of GlaxoSmithKline, Vodafone, Unilever, Google, E.ON and many others. He's one of the UK's most respected innovators, and we're delighted to have him with us today. So this week, like last week, I'd like to tempt you all to look beyond the here and now and challenge yourself around how you think about and how you approach innovation, as our collective confidence, inspiration is likely to be a defining factor in how successfully UK PLC can emerge from the current disruptive forces that are shaking us. To help us from time to time today, I'll be calling on some of our Protiviti consultants to share their own research and perspectives, for which they've had total editorial control. And lastly, just as it is World Cancer Day today on February the 4th, we wanted to mark this properly. And so I'm delighted to say that we're joined here today by Jessica Ruth from Maggie's, the amazing charity providing free cancer support across the UK to patients and their families. And cancer, I'm very aware, is something that is likely to have touched many of our lives in one way or another. So towards the end of the session today, we'll be taking a short break from proceedings just to hear about some of the great work Maggie's are doing and helping businesses like yours support their staff dealing with cancer in the workplace. But first, I'd like to once again welcome Josh and start by asking you, Josh, just to tell us a little bit about yourself and what innovation means to you.
Well, morning, everybody. Thank you for having me here this morning, and thank you for joining us. Sure, I'm a full-blown nerd, proper geek. I was involved in Robot Wars back when I was 10 years old. I think a lot of people remember Robot Wars, but for those that don't, the BBC launched a TV show that encouraged people to design robots to try and attack each other live on TV. And as a 10-year-old, there wasn't anything much more fascinating than that. So I turned up to these events expecting it to be a very sort of scrappy event with people mucking around and, you know, everybody just making things out of a garage. And it turned out to be an incredibly structured event full of everybody having PhDs and serious amounts of corporate sponsorship. And I was 10 years old, you know, 3 foot high, and my parents with me. So I just kind of got stuck in. Nobody told me to go away. So I just started to play. I started to make things with Lego and masking tape and anything I could get hold of, just to try and compete with these guys that were making obviously much more serious machines. But nobody told me to go away. So I carried on over the years, and I learned how to do the design that came with this. I learned how to do the maths that came around all of the robotics, and everything was very specific questions. And I was sort of lucky to have grown up in an age where, you know, the internet was becoming much more prominent, and I could very quickly go, okay, well, how do you solve that maths equation? How do you solve this? So it wasn't a question of learning maths. It was a question of trying to do what I wanted to do. And after a few years, I got to the point where I just couldn't do that at home anymore. You know, I couldn't do that with masking tape and a drill. So I started taking these drawings out to factories around the UK. And they more or less laughed in my face. I had a paper round, so I had about £13 a week in change to take to these manufacturers. So I take a piece of metal and some drawings and, you know, £12.50 and say, right, I need you to make this. And these guys were just so confused by this kid that kept turning up. And they all seem to have this running joke of, oh, you should go to China. Go to China. You can spend your pocket money in China. But this was before the Chinese manufacturing economy was really online and on the internet. So the only people in China who you know, you could find were people from the UK, from Europe, from America, who'd taken manufacturing facilities out to China, but understood how we were starting to use the internet to advertise and communicate. So when you go home and you Google Chinese factory, I was very lucky to find that all of the top results were English people who'd taken their manufacturers from, you know, the north of England or the Midlands out to Shenzhen. And so I had all these manufacturers I could speak English to. I could trade in sterling or dollars. And it didn't feel any different to working with somebody who might be in Birmingham or Northampton. So I spent a few years talking to some strange people on the internet, sending money out to the middle of rural China. This story could have gone very differently. I started working with proper supply chain, making crazier and crazier things. And it all started to get a bit out of control. The people involved in robotics were all heads of engineering at large companies. They were all involved in some serious commercial manufacturing. And they just started to say to me, you know, can you come and help me make this piece of my car or my hobby or my robot or whatever? And then it became, well, can you come to work with me and help me have a look at this problem? You know, we're redesigning this product. How would you do it? We're redesigning this tool. How would you cut some cost? Or, you know, we're very scared about working with China at this point in time. You know, how would you rearrange this supply chain? And over the years, it just got bigger and bigger. And supply chain is a very remote service, so people don't ask you to come and meet them. Everything is done by calls, and that was just a standard way to do things. So I did that for 2.5 years before anybody asked how old I was. The first few people who brought me in, they knew that I was, you know, 16, 17. But as you got introduced to more and more people, no one thought to ask how old a supply chain consultant is, because there aren't many people at school that yearn to be a supply chain consultant. So I was 18 when I got fired, and they realized that I was too young to be managing tens of millions of dollars of liabilities. But the point still stood that there was a huge amount of opportunity that was made within those few years. And, you know, the money saved for these companies, the products that were launched, were all genuine and valid. That, you know, all of that was a good contribution. So I started to think about, well, what is it that's missing in these businesses? And the real thing that these businesses and the majority of businesses miss is the gap between ideas and big supply chain. Most businesses are very good at coming up with ideas or working with agencies that are good at developing new concepts for them. And they're very good at building big supply chain, you know, tens of millions of dollars, very consistent production. Where they really struggle is the piece in the middle. So RPD, my business now that I've been running for the last almost 10 years, is about connecting those dots, giving people the opportunity to say, right, I want one of those, or I want to solve this consumer insight, and I want to see 100,000 consumers with that product in the next 18 months. Go. And putting that all in one place. So yeah, it does put us in quite an interesting position to talk about innovation, because we are so deeply involved with so many of the R&D departments around the world.
Josh, thank you for that. What you're describing there sounds fascinating. It may obviously be slightly different to some of the setup that people have here who work for small, medium enterprises, large corporates, whatever. So we've talked a lot about innovation in this forum and how it's central for driving meaningful change and differentiation in our post-pandemic, our post-Brexit future. So with the audience we have today, what do you think the companies and people in UK PLC should think? How should they think about innovation? What needs to change for it to be most effective?
I think there's probably two main things that are maybe misconstrued about innovation. I think one of those is that innovation is just about ideas. It's just about putting post-it notes on glass walls, having beanbags in the office and wearing yellow trousers. That's not innovation, but it's how it's portrayed. And the other thing is considering innovation and risk to be harmonious. That any form of innovation is about risk, and it's about investing in or gambling. And that's where, especially in the UK market, you know, we work with big companies, but also SMEs. The attitude from UK businesses at any scale is that innovation is risk, and therefore we need to consider that as a budget that can be lost, which is not the best way to approach it. I think there are much better ways to A, consider risk, but B, approach it from a financial and a planning standpoint.
So, and where do you think the companies then? So you talk about kind of, you know, not having beanbags. I mean, is it a mindset? How do companies then better embrace it and start that journey? Yeah,
so this is, I guess, with a lot of businesses we work with, and this applies cross-category, right? So this is, you know, in defence, in consumer goods, in startups with only 2 or 3 people. Moving innovation to be something you think about as deliverables rather than ideas is the big shift. So taking people away from, people have these innovation clouds and innovation sessions they hold, with all hands meetings where people come and contribute ideas. All of these are about ideas. They're about opportunities. They're not about any kind of execution. And to us, innovation is about executing on ideas. It's not about coming up with great opportunities. It's about actually going ahead, pushing them forwards and seeing what does and doesn't work. So for all of these businesses that we've seen be very successful, they've moved to a more pipeline approach to innovation. So in the same way you manage a sales pipeline, you know, you have 100 leads, and then you have 10 of those that are real prospects, and then you have 5 of those you write a proposal to, and maybe 3 of those go to contracting, and you close 1. It's a very predictable process in sales, right? You know that you need 100 leads to get 1 deal. You know what your average deal is. You know what the time to conversion is on average. And this is where you take innovation from a nice fluffy thing you can talk about to something where you can actually say, yes, this is how much we invest in innovation. This is how much we get out of it. Here's the actual percentage risk of innovation for us. And okay, this sounds enormous for small companies, and it sounds maybe too rough and ready for larger companies, but it's that kind of scrappiness and slight ignorance that makes innovation work within these businesses, and not trying to do that at group level is the critical thing. Is to allow people to have the variation to talk about this at every level of the business, that starts to change that attitude and make innovation something that is purely about execution and delivery on ideas, concepts, and eventually a return on investment, than it is a nice shiny idea.
Okay. And Josh, one of the themes we've had in this in this forum is around customer centricity. And, I imagine that's of growing importance around innovation, not just customer centricity, but actually understanding your people and how they are going to be driving innovation in different ways. And just before we delve into that, what I might just do is ask Jordan, one of our colleagues here within Protiviti, just to share some thoughts around that, around the importance of customer centricity and understanding the people that are involved in innovation.
Thank you so much, Paul. Just a question that I almost wanted to put on the spotlight today was, why do businesses need to evolve to be able to keep pace with a customer? And I suppose a spotlight and focus that I wanted to look at over here is Generation Z. Why? Well, because of its close link and cornerstone to innovation. Gen Z, typically known as your Zoomers, are post-millennial, anything the mid-1990s up until present. And I suppose just key focus items that I'm going to focus on is looking at their online dependency, changing values, and diversity. Their online dependency, I suppose, is something that I wanted to look at with regards to product generation and development. How are we going to be providing product generation and development to be only serviced on an online platform? Partly because Generation Z is extremely influential, and I suppose they're pushed to even the millennial generation in working purely online. Another factor, I suppose, is that Generation Z's core focus on changing values is that they look at purpose and mission. So what does that look at? The environment, sustainability, and what is the message around that product that is going to be developed, and the signal that that will send to the market is a key focus in their purchase decision. I suppose that links onto the next point, which looks at diversity. I suppose innovation and diversity moving forward into the next generations is going to move hand in hand. Interestingly enough, we've seen the likes of Kellogg product development has seen that diverse groups have better idea generation and information processing. So that idea, I suppose, of product development moving forward, how will that diversity be incorporated? And I suppose lastly, tying into the last point, looking at innovation, is that innovation is going to have to work hand in hand with Generation Z. And I suppose it's product development and product generation going into the future. So I suppose, Josh, just based on the information that I've just presented now, I just actually had a follow-on question, interestingly enough, just around customer centricity and looking at, well, how are we going to engage with our customers to understand what is most relevant to them going forward? And how should innovation keep up with the changes and differences in the evolution of customers going forward?
Thanks, Jordan. It's a real challenge, and it has been, I'd say, for the last 3 to 5 years. I think prior to that, the world expected products to be launched and to live for 10 years. Somebody would launch something that would be interesting, and you would expect to see that on the shelves for 10 years in most categories, right? I think in this age of Gen Z, but also Kickstarter and the internet as well, this interconnected age where I can see exactly what you can buy in Hong Kong, in Thailand, in New York, in London, in Paris, all at once, all on one screen. You've got this incredible pace of expectation. You've got this incredible attitude that things should work for me. So previously you'd say, right, that's what's available, and therefore I will find the thing that fits what I want best. Whereas that attitude has very much shifted to, that's what I want and it needs to be available. And if it doesn't quite meet what I want, I'm going to absolutely tear it apart all across the internet. And that's quite a dangerous place to do innovation. That's quite a dangerous place to launch products and to put yourself out there. I think this puts more and more onus on the developer or the person creating innovation. And we're talking about products, but this could be services, it could be experiences, it could be anything else. It's putting more and more onus on asking the questions. I see regularly people who spend hundreds of millions of dollars on innovation, or, in smaller businesses, 90% of their budget on new ideas. And yet the way that they test those ideas, the way they work with consumers is still how you would have done it 20 years ago. I work with a big German FMCG manufacturer. They spend hundreds of millions of dollars on innovation. They will still pay you €50 to come and have a shower in front of a two-way mirror in their office. That $100 million that goes into innovation is validated against the 20 people that don't mind accepting $50 to have €50 to have somebody watch them have a shower. There is a particular kind of person that will take that money and do those things. They don't tend to be representative of the entire consumer base, and we have much better ways to understand what's going on nowadays. And I think as people become more and more demanding of products, and products become more customized, and the supply chain actually starts to allow you to do that and provide more customized services and experiences, these companies are going to become much smarter about how they ask the question, how they bring people on board, and actually involve their customers in the development cycle, because you're no longer allowed to launch something for 10 years. You've got 6 months to hit the shelves, make your money, and work on version 2. And that's a very different world for a lot of these businesses.
Josh, thank you for that. And John, thank you as well. Josh, I'd just like to take a question from the audience and allow you to get allow you to get on your soapbox a bit with this. As someone that's been involved in innovation and technology at an early age, what do you think our education system should focus on? I'm sure many people here have kids schooling at home at the minute. So what should the education system focus on in regards to skills to the future? Is it STEM, something else? What are your thoughts around that as you look at that industry and that sector?
Yeah, okay, you've got me right on the soapbox. This is a big bone of contention.
Go for it.
Obviously, I went to school. I would say I went to school until about GCSEs. I think I was technically enrolled for my A levels. I think I went in about 3 times, and I turned up for my exams, and that was about it. And it was partly because I was busy. I was working. I was doing all of this consultancy around the world, and I had lots on my plate. But it was also because I was very much disenfranchised with school. I'd always been fascinated by school. And as I got into the later levels of school, I personally felt quite disenfranchised because I was seeing the real world. And okay, that's different to a lot of other people going through schooling, but I was seeing what happens in engineering. I was seeing what happens in the jobs that I wanted to do with my future. And it was such a world away from education. It was so, I interviewed to go to universities, and I went to some places to talk about studying engineering and some trial lectures. And I got into an argument with a lecturer actually in a trial lecture, because they were talking about the biggest issue with a new type of design for a wind farm, or I think it was a blade on a wind turbine. And I put my hand up and I said, it's procurement. I said, no, it's not procurement. And everybody had a shot at it. And I put my hand up again and said, no, it's still procurement. And they just couldn't get over the fact that what they considered the issue with the innovation in this wind farm was the 0.1% of efficiency in the thermodynamics, when the reality was that procurement don't know how to buy this thing because it's new, and they don't know how to bring it into the supply chain, and therefore it will never go anywhere. The problem is not math, the problem is people and the practicalities around engineering. And so, although I can't speak for the broader world of education, for me, the thing that's missing in education at the moment is the practical understanding of how industry works, the connection between teachers who are fantastic at teaching maths, physics, and very academic versions of subjects, and their experience or access to people with experience of real industry who can show you what it's like. So I think making the world better for your children is about giving them more work experience, more access to people who do real things, and showing them what the real world is like. I mean, the majority of us on this call would have left school and then realized that they were in no way equipped to do anything with real life, because most of the things at school are very theoretical, and you don't have that understanding what's coming. So yeah, for me, it's practicality. We do a lot of work with the Royal Academy of Engineering about trying to bring proper engineering into schools, but we need the whole country to get behind that change in attitude to very practical teaching.
And Josh, coming through a school system, we are imbued with a sense of, with exams in particular, which we either pass or we fail. That gives us, we are all looking to succeed in life, and obviously success is something we strive for. But with innovation, failure can actually be a positive thing, and there's always a risk of failing with innovation. And I'm sure we want to fail in order to learn. So how do you get people used to that idea of failing, whether it's okay? How do you make it part of the process?
Yeah, it's a very good point. I mean, firstly, the companies that we consider to be big innovators over the last 20 years, right? At IBM, and then Amazon, then Apple, or Apple, then Amazon, but probably about the same time, right? Yeah, we all consider them to be some big innovators that have changed the world. Those three companies are famous for products that they didn't invent in any way. IBM didn't invent personal computing, Amazon certainly didn't invent e-commerce, and Apple didn't invent the MP3 player. And yet these are the things they're touted with as being the world's disruptors of. And the reason for that is when they look at their pipeline, they don't look at what's moving through the pipeline, so what's being successful and moving to next stages. What they really focus on is what's fallen off, so what failed. I mean, how many people on this call have been involved in some sort of project where it failed and everyone went, well, if only we had this, or if only that was different. It's almost every project, right? The difference in these businesses that are brilliant at innovation is they have that conversation and then they go, right, brilliant, put it back in the pipeline. And on the day we can give it what we said it should have had, we'll put it back through. And that means that some ideas fail in the 1998, went back into the pipeline in 2012 because technology had reached a point where that what if or that if only was possible. And they're really, really strict about tracking that. So making the process very much focused on understanding why things failed starts to give it legitimacy, starts to give it opportunity, because you're putting value on the reason for the failure, not the loss or the disappointment that comes with that. And then the communication that comes with it. The thing that companies really fall down on is they say, we want to do innovation. And that tends to come from the top. And it's a big announcement that we're doing innovation this year. Well done, guys. And that's it. Maybe there's some money awarded. By September, somebody's stolen that money to spend it on something that's not innovation, but we can find a way to make it look like innovation because we wanted to use that money. And by the end of the year, you haven't heard about that program again. There's none of this committing to X projects or committing to X people being involved in innovation. There's no tangible part of this investment. And then there's no update. There's no, some of the best companies that we work with limit those innovation budgets to really small amounts of money for the first stage, just so they've got a million things to look at and talk about. So I've got a defense company that have a £500 first stage cap on their innovation budget. So you've got people designing jet engines for fighter planes with toilet rolls because they've got £500 to spend to prove that this should be invested in. But those companies will sit down at the end of every month and go, right, here's 10 things we've played with this month. 9 of them failed. This is why. And here's something that's interesting that's going forwards. And they talk about those failures because it legitimizes that is part of the course. That is why our innovation conversion rate is 4%. However, here's what happens when it goes well. And talking about these things throughout the year, bringing people into that story is what makes failure acceptable and proves the value in it, because eventually you say this failed last year, now it's back and it works.
And Josh, that attitude towards failure, I'm sure, is just one of those aspects that holds back companies from time to time, or can be the difference between an innovative company and one that just has a veneer of innovation. But there are other forces as well, culturally, that and a mindset of innovation that hold companies back. What's your advice then to companies around how they should best embed those programs of innovation?
There's a sad truth here that most people have lost faith. Most people have worked in their business. They have sat on the firing line and they know what needs to change. They know what's wrong, or they know what the customer needs, or they can see what needs to happen. And in most cases, they've tried to put that forwards. They've tried to say, right, we should change this. And they've been pushed back and it's not quite gone anywhere. Or they've been encouraged to do something. And then when they've actually gone and put the effort in, it's not gone anywhere. In most cases, with most businesses that have been around for a while, that is the attitude. Why should I bother? Because I've tried this before and it doesn't go anywhere. So the shift to innovation starts with empowering people to come on board and be part of that process. It starts with saying, actually, you know what, this is not a top-down thing. It's understanding that innovation could be run at any level. We do a lot of work where we work with much lower level managers and even operating staff, right on the ground, to talk about how they manage innovation within their team. And that team might be 2 of them, 5, 10, 20. This is not a 1,000-person group-wide operation. It's getting people in small groups to practice running innovation programs, to be given some budget, but also just freedom, because not everything costs money. Sometimes it's just being allowed to do something, to experiment and to bring that forwards and to use that as a proof point. I mean, we're British, right? We love it when we get it right and you thought we were going to be wrong. That makes our day. And if you can capitalize on that and let people use innovation as a way to prove people wrong, and to show that you can make change, and that you can bring something to this company that the board can't, because they can't see what's going on the ground. That's where you start to change that culture. The worst thing you can do then in that circumstance is then you have a very mixed message between people who do get to innovate and people who get shot down. This has to be something that can be done by R&D, engineering, customer service, sales, reception. It needs to be open to everybody.
So that's a very good point you bring us on to, because once you've got all those ideas and you've got that culture of innovation, you've got the good, the bad, the crazy ideas, and you're triaging those, you've got those ideas, those concepts, those opportunities. What are you supposed to do with them then? I mean, how do you take them from that toilet roll that you mentioned, or the idea on a piece of paper, to whatever, to actual reality? How do you take it forward?
Yeah, so again, we talked about those big three companies that are considered innovators. This is a piece they're really good at, right? I think most of us will remember Google Glass, which was the product where you could project a screen into your line of sight in a pair of glasses, and they felt there was some real future to that. And when you talk to people about how they developed Google Glass, which was 5-10 years ago now, it's probably 10 years ago now, it was a big innovation. People were really fascinated by this, and people assumed that it's Google, they put $100 million behind it, and they had 1,000 people working on this thing. But they didn't. The thing that these businesses are really good at is understanding innovation is about isolating the most audacious part of an idea. Prototyping is not about spending a huge amount of money to try and do everything all at once, because otherwise we'd never get anywhere. It's about identifying what's genuinely new. If you can bring me an idea that is genuinely new in every way, I'd be absolutely astonished. I've never seen it. In 10 years, I've never seen it. Innovation is primarily 99% off the shelf and 1% interesting. So trying to find out what that 1% interesting is the key. So when Google did Google Glass, the first version wasn't something that looked like Google Glass at all. It was a computer that was the size of this room that I'm in. There was an umbilical cord that was that diameter, that was 5 meters long. There was a backpack, a headset. But all they had to prove was that when you project some light into somebody's eye, they don't instantly throw up and fall over. That's all they had. So the only thing that wasn't from an existing retailer was one piece of glass that they had machined to project the light.
Yeah.
And so they put that on somebody, they don't fall over, they don't throw up all over the place. Brilliant. Right, next challenge, can we get it small enough that they can wear it in a big backpack with a big helmet for an hour? And can they walk around with this thing? If I'm projecting a screen into your line of sight, can you walk around without falling over or walking into somebody or getting distracted? And if we can validate that, then we move on to, well, can we make it small enough to wear for a day? Then we start to talk about, well, what's it for? What information can I put into your line of sight? What's the value that brings? And then you make it smaller and smaller and smaller, right? But the thing is that the first version of Google Glass only had one custom component. Everything else was from Radio Shack. That's how you do innovation. And I think that often gets lost in the idea that actually it would be a lot more fun if we spent $1 million and made this thing straight away. But that's not the way to manage it financially. It's not the way to manage it in terms of expectation and engagement in innovation, because if you do that, you fail.
So I hear what you're saying, Josh. I guess there's a lot of people here in industries such as financial services though who aren't able to cobble together the bits and pieces from Radio Shack or whatever. So how do you take what you've just said there and apply it to a large financial institution or a media company? How does that work in their world?
Yeah, I think that's similar to the work that we do in defence, where it's not about a technical solution. It's about regulation and certification, and how do you bring something new to a world that is so tightly defined? And I think that it still applies. You've still got the majority of a concept that is normal, understood, and compliant, with a very small piece that's actually innovative. And I think this is where, especially when regulation's involved, things get blown out of proportion. We've never done it like that. We're not going to be able to get this through regulation. Actually, when you step back from those ideas and just say, well, what part of this is most audacious? you realize it's a very small part, and most things can be positioned in a way that make them look familiar. And so it's as simple as that. It's not a silver bullet. It's just actually asking that question and re-looking at these things that you thought were changing the world. Well, they still might, but 99% of them are existing, are already regulated and fit. It's only trying to isolate that tiny piece, because then you can go to a regulator and you can say, well, we'd like to do this bit slightly differently. That seems to make sense. And on its own, it makes sense, and you start to push these things through. Otherwise, these ideas are too big to change in an industry that's stuck. And when you're in a highly regulated area, that's difficult. But otherwise, this same principle applies to services and people in marketing and anywhere else. It's the same challenges.
So thank you. And just to build on, I'd like to pick up one of the questions in the chat, and thank you for all the questions coming through. There's so many and so many comments, which is fantastic to see. I can't see everyone in the meeting, Josh, but it's probably fair to say you're younger than the average age here. And there has been a reflection of saying, well, they hear the passion and they hear it. But for those people, let's say, who are in the middle of their careers, or the later part of their careers, how do they become part of this Generation Z revolution? Do they need to go to China? Do they need to do something else? How do they plug themselves into this?
That's a very good question. I think the thing that's potentially different, as Jordan said, with people from Gen Z or what we consider the innovative part of the workforce, which I don't think is true. I think the innovation comes from people, well, from my next point, which is from people who care. I speak to a lot of people who work in a lot of different places, and I reckon 20% of them care about what they do. Like, genuinely care, like sit there on a Sunday and go, what am I going to do this week? What am I going to do to try and make a difference? There's a lot of people that do their job and they enjoy it and it's fine. But people who are up late on a Saturday night thinking about what they're doing are the people who have an impact and make a difference. And this is not a time for a mass change of career role and everything else. But I think that is the key, is working out what you really care about. Because then all of this innovation and all of this change comes. You can't read books on innovation to make you more innovative, but you can get excited about things you care about and have an impact. Sorry, that's a bit more of a holistic than an operational answer, but that's kind of my stance.
It's a very good answer, and I think it's one that will resonate with a lot of people here, because I do think that at the core is what can drive so much and make so much achievable here. Just linked to that care point then, and this is another question that came through on the chat, and maybe offers you another soapbox moment here, but to hear your view around in terms of where you see sustainability fitting into the innovation process, by both environmental but also ethical and social responsibility in that as well.
I would say that 2020, I'm really proud of the entire world for their change in attitude to sustainability. I think the lockdowns and the proof that we could affect the world so drastically in such a short amount of time, obviously not in the best of circumstances, but it proved to the world that we can have an impact. This is not all complete rubbish. We can do something about it. And that attitude shifted. I mean, obviously, most projects mention sustainability. And for the first 5 years of RPD, people would mention it and they'd say, if it's a cheaper option, we'll take it, but we're not going to invest in it. Then it started to change to, we really want it because we think the consumers will want it, but we don't have much budget for it. And innovation and sustainability was still expensive. And it's depressing that it comes down to cost, but a lot of these things do. And then probably 2019, it started to change. In 2020, it was revolutionized. The consumer said, I will only buy innovation. I will only buy things that make a difference to sustainability. And that totally shifted everything. The pricing of sustainable materials, the attitude of clients willing to invest in sustainable supply chains. And one of the things that was never getting attention, people were all over using brown craft paper as wrapping paper because it looked more environmentally sustainable. It isn't in most cases, but they were all over using materials that looked sustainable. And that was often something we were asked about. Can we make it look sustainable? How about you pay for it and you make it sustainable? No, just make it look that way because it's the consumer. What changed is people's acceptance and understanding that it's not just about the obvious things for sustainability. It's about the back end. It's about supply chain. It's about the actual manufacturing process. Most people forget that when you buy a product, how many other products died before they found that one that was successful enough on the production line. It is not 100% yield when you produce something. There are some very big technology companies who claim to have these enormous sustainability programs. But I can tell you for a fact that they are creating production quotas for yield rates on their production lines that factories can't meet. The standards for the product they're expecting at component level are too high for the factory to meet. Now, if the factory don't meet it, they lose their projects, just 90% of their revenue. So they need to show that they meet it, which means they do all sorts of things to show that they meet these production yields, which means there is a huge amount of waste that isn't tracked in those supply chains to actually go into their sustainability reports. So they write these big sustainability reports saying, yeah, we have a 99.8% yield. We only waste, X 100 kilos of plastic a year. It's rubbish because at the supply chain level, this stuff is broken down. So more and more attention now is coming into that supply chain, that due diligence of sustainability in the supply chain, and the attitude that it's not just what the consumer sees, it's also us holding true to our morals around reporting on sustainability, therefore knowing that the data we're presenting is correct. And that's where we have a real impact. Yes, recyclable packaging is going to be a good thing for the world, but if you can solve things that you thought would, 99% yield in production that are actually 60%, you've got hundreds of millions of tons of plastic and waste product that goes to landfill every year that's rescued.
So Josh, hold that thought for me. I'm going to come back to you very shortly and give you a little bit of a hard time, and I'll dig maybe into more about your work with China and your supply chain stretching out all that way. But before I do, you talk very eloquently about the importance of caring, and I thought I'd just use that as a juncture just to jump in, as I mentioned before, and introduce Maggie's. Today's World Cancer Day, and I'd like us just to hear for a couple of minutes from Jessica Ruth from Maggie's. And Maggie's is a UK charity that offers free support to anyone affected by cancer. We've heard a lot today about innovation, and sadly, their innovation is something that has not yet managed to find a cure for cancer. So it's with us and it affects so many of our lives. Jessica, you lead Maggie's fundraising, and I just thought it'd be great just to, if you could just give us an idea today on World Cancer Day, just about how you've been helping businesses support their staff dealing with cancer in the workplace during this time, and maybe particularly during the pandemic.
Yeah, thank you very much, Paul. Thank you for the opportunity. So, yeah, as Paul said, we are a national charity. I am based in the Manchester Centre, which is opposite the Christie Hospital. We are a drop-in service for anybody affected by cancer. So anybody can come in and get the support they need. We have trained professionals on site, including psychologists, benefits advisors to help people who've got money worries, highly trained nurses with specialising in cancer to help answer questions that people might have. But more importantly, what we're doing at the moment is we have developed a programme where we can help employers educate their staff on how to deal with cancer in the workplace. So we have sessions which can educate HR professionals, managers on what the effects of cancer might be for people within the workplace, because often there's so much else outside of what you think chemotherapy might do to people and radiotherapy that we can help with and we can advise. But more importantly, we can be there to answer those questions that as a manager, as an employer, you might have about someone who has just had a diagnosis or is returning to work or is supporting a family member. We can be there and offer that support. But what we're also doing as well at the moment is some well-being work. So we today are doing an online relaxation session over a lunchtime period for lots of different businesses, just to give their staff that 45 minutes to take a bit of a break, rejuvenate themselves, and also take away some tips, because we all know at the moment that things are so different to where they were 12 months ago, and people are finding it really hard, and there's a change. Everybody's working from home, we're all working differently, we're having to find lots of different ways to work. So we're doing what we can to support employers and their staff, and just really educate on how to take those relaxation tips away, but really look after people's mental health and well-being.
Jessica, so thank you so much for that, and thank you for all the work that you and Maggie's do. You'll see everyone, you can see in the chat, there is a link there if you want to get involved with Maggie's or support Maggie's. And yeah, thank you once again, Jessica. That's really, really valuable to hear that. And thank you for all the work you're doing.
No problem.
So, Josh, to come back to yourself, as I said, you talk very eloquently about sustainability and the importance of that. You have a big supply chain. You stretch across. You mentioned about working with China as well. How does that firstly kind of, I guess, reconcile from a sustainability perspective, but also how are you driving disruption and innovation in your supply chain as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I think firstly, there's a misconception that working in China is a non-sustainable thing to do. The reason that China is such an interesting place still, because it used to be labor costs, right? It used to all be about, well, China was cheap. China's not cheap. In some cases, I'm paying more to factory staff in China than I would be in the UK. It's not a cheap place for labor anymore, and there are much better labor laws there now that I would say are comparative to some European countries and in the UK than how they used to be. The reason China is interesting is because China has the entire supply chain within 50 kilometers in various manufacturing centers, right? If I produce something in Europe, I need product from, I'd say, 8 to 10 countries. So I've got 8 to 10 borders to navigate. I've got all of those shipments coming from all these different places. I've got all these people that could get upset and ruin my supply chain and create risk. Whereas in China, I've got metal ore to final product within 50 kilometers. Every supplier can cross the road between. So you reduce a huge amount of logistics between the supply chain, which is often forgotten. But then you've also got the problem solving that comes with that. If one factory isn't getting the supply they need from the other, I almost don't need to be involved. They'll cross the road and go, guys, I need to deliver my work. You need to go and get me some product, sort it out. No one has to get on a plane. No one has to go and converse in different languages. No one has to work with cross-border translation and cross-border declarations on component level of the supply chain. And that's why China is still so valuable to us, and why we're still investing heavily in China, is because you have that density of supply chain that you don't have anywhere else in the world. So yes, in some cases it's unsustainable to be shipping product a long way around the world. That can be negated by the saving in or the sustainability of that density of supply chain during production, but also negated in the way that things are shipping. There are electric and hydrogen powered sea freight options nowadays. We also have the train. We ship a lot of product by train from the south of China all the way through China, through some of the Middle East, through Russia, and into Europe. And that's been an enormous innovation, because not only is it quicker than the sea freight, it can actually be more sustainable. So yeah, I'd be very wary to say that China is unsustainable, although I understand the preconceptions about it.
Thank you, Josh. There've been a lot of chats and comments coming through the chat. I'm just going to open it to the floor then. Anyone have any questions for Josh? If you do, stick up your hand and I'll come to you, or just shout out. You'll struggle for the mute button.
Hey, Paul, it's Roland. I've got a question.
Hey, Roland. Thank you.
Thanks for all that insight, Josh. Just a question about innovation systems. So you'll no doubt be aware of Google's Design Sprint, Luma, D-School. What's your take on these systems as part of your innovation pipeline? Are they critical, maybe overly constraining?
I think it all comes back to, you need teams to engage and be excited. And therefore, we always leave tools quite open. There's people in our team that love and are really invested in certain types of tools. There are other people that refuse to use tools altogether. And what we try and do is maintain the stage gates. So this is what we need at the end of this stage of innovation. This is how much money and time you've got to invest. But how you get there is up to you. And we found that in our business and with client businesses, that's worked better, because some people, these tools are subjective. Some people like them. Some people think they're complete rubbish. And you've got to let people play with them in the way that they want to. Otherwise, you get a lot of sarcasm. And that's never productive in innovation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Josh. Thank you. Any other questions?
I've got a quick question, if that's okay, Andrea. So I'm going to flip it around. For those companies which were very innovative and very, the small startups, how do you feel their journey is into becoming bigger corporates because they've grown, and how do they cope with that kind of cultural shift? Because they want to retain their innovation, but governance comes in and you've got to have a big business and suddenly you've got 13,000 employees. How have you got any views on that?
It's really difficult. I mean, we're certainly not that size yet, but going through the different brackets of people has been difficult. We've been larger than we are right now. We've been smaller. The world feels entirely different, dependent and very sensitively on how many people are in the business. I think, again, I'll come back to this thing around people are motivated by the things they care about. And as you grow, making sure that you are putting people in place who care about what they do. One of the things that we ask when we're hiring people is what's the best job in the world? What do you want to do? If you could do anything, what would that be? And if you turn around and say, I want to be a concert pianist, it doesn't matter how good you are, we're not going to hire you because we're not putting you on a path to what you want to do with your life. And that so far has proved quite a good filter, because where people have said, I will really want to do something with my life that's not quite what RPD can give me, or not quite where this job is going to give me a leg up to, it hasn't worked because they don't truly care about what they do. We want people who say, right, I want to make a real breakthrough in sustainability, or I want to be a global project manager of a major engineering company. Those are things where we can give you a leg up. Working for us takes you on a journey, and even if that means we are your 2-year stopgap to getting to the next level of where you want to go, you are going to care about what you do. And I think companies that grow very, very quickly, like a lot of these startups do, lose sight of that because they're trying to get hold of resources as quick as they can. And I think in the long term, having personally done that as well, where we grew very quickly to service a bunch of projects and sort of got rid of some of the more touchy-feely questions, it hurts long term. Those people don't quite fit amongst the people who are really passionate. And the worst thing is the people who are really passionate get disenfranchised. And that's always going to be worse for the business. So, it's a very hard thing to handle. I think maintaining your focus on making sure you're working with people who care, and making sure when you identify people who've lost vision, lost the foresight, lost or they become disengaged, that's fine, that happens, but they're carefully navigated to where they need to be, so as not to impact the people who do still really care.
So about culture. And
culture driven by people, not by fancy presentations, I think is the key.
Yeah. Thank you.
And I love that as an interview question. I'm sure people will be storing that one away. That's a great one.
Question. We also ask what kind of biscuit you'd like to be. I don't know where that came from, but we still ask it.
Yeah, that's an outside the box one, certainly.
Careful, Josh and Paul. You're gonna put Robert Half out of business if you carry on like this.
If there are any other questions, please put your hands up, and I'll come to you. But Josh, I'd like to just look forward for a little bit now. So, you've mentioned a lot about innovation. Where do you think then are the big opportunities? Not just in your world, but if you were working in financial services, media, telecoms, whatever, and you're looking where can we apply innovation, and what are those big opportunities out there for us at the minute?
I think the inevitable juggernaut that's coming is customization. I'm not big on the customization train. I don't think it's very sustainable. I don't think it's like a drug. We shouldn't be giving that to consumers in any format, because it's only going to get worse, and then trying to meet the sustainability targets we all have with the mass customization expectations that people are building is going to get really, really difficult. But I think it's inevitable. We talked earlier about the expectation from consumers for things to fit them. And that comes down to, we have a program for products that are quite hard to understand. You often ask people what they think of a new product. They always say, I hate it or I love it, based on how they feel about new things. It's nothing to do with the product. So we have a system where we put sensors into products to see what people actually do with them. So not what your opinion is of them, but what did you actually do with that? And you'll find that people sit on a chair differently in Paris versus London versus Manchester. That sounds mad, but it's true. And those very, very slight tweaks in the way that people do things, want to do things, perceive things, are starting to be monitored, and products starting to be customized to suit them. It's no longer about colors. It's about actually the way you live your life in a product that suits you. And I think that expectation and the ability to deliver on that means that that is going to become an inevitable part of the next 10 to 20 years, is that extreme customization in products, in services, in experiences. You know, I reckon that two people walk into a retail environment in 10 years' time and they will have entirely different experiences based on what we know about you and we know about what you're going to do and what would most influence your buying habits. I think that's quite scary, quite difficult to maintain a focus on sustainability during delivering that kind of experience. But I think consumers are inadvertently asking for it, and there's enough companies willing to give it to them that it will become global expectation.
Yeah. Okay. No, that makes a lot of sense. I think, you know, again, will resonate across the audience here. So just a last perspective then from you, Josh. What are you most excited about then? So turning back to your world, what innovations are exciting you most at the minute? What are you pushing towards?
Yeah, sorry, that was a rather doom and gloom view of the world. I'm an engineer. I'm a pessimist by nature. The things that excite me are the pace of that innovation. Yes, customization is coming. I think it will be bad for the environment, but very good for the consumer. But innovation's moving so fast, it'll be gone again very quickly. So let's not worry too much. The things that are really exciting me are the opening up of innovation in the medical space. When I first started this business, to launch a medical device company, it was a big budget, big team, big experience thing to do. Nowadays, we have clients who are two people just left university and they've already got 10,000 customers whose lives are entirely changed by the way that their products are able to treat them, to provide support, rehabilitation and everything else. We're working on a real eclectic mix of medical devices from reducing Parkinson's, the effects of Parkinson's, increasing the efficiencies of IVF whilst reducing the cost, rehabilitation for stroke victims. We've got a real eclectic mix of medical device companies. And I'll tell you what, the innovation coming out of a two-person team who are able to bring something to a consumer's hands within 18 months is far greater than our pharma companies, who won't mind me saying this because they're desperate to change as well, who struggle to get to a customer or a patient within 5 years. They can't compete with this anymore, and that is what's going to change the world, is healthcare run by people who are much smaller and understand the problem and the patient.
Josh, I think that's an amazing note to end on, and I think a really good reflection, and I think really goes back, I think, to that core point that you've made time and time again around putting people in the right place where they can care about what they do. I think is at the heart of driving innovation from the very start. And just to reflect on some of the other themes, the willing to fail, the pipeline of innovation. You've talked about allowing people to fail and to grow from that. And I think you've also everyone here, I think, got at least two other great interview questions. It's great to see the amount of chat about the biscuit in the sidebar here. So look, we've run out of time. That's an amazing session, Josh. Thank you ever so much. Jordan, thank you, and Ruth, thank you as well. I'm sorry, Jessica, thank you as well. That's fantastic. I'm sorry if I didn't get to your question, but I hope you liked what you've heard today. If you'd like to know more, you can find Josh on LinkedIn. You can find Josh on his website. You can interact with him there. There'll be a video of our forum today if you want to listen to it again on our website, and also on YouTube, and also on LinkedIn. Next week, we turn to the backbone of the UK, at the finance industry. We've got the CEO from the Financial Services Compensation Scheme. We've got the CEO of Cash Plus. We've got UK Finance and others. And it promises to be a fascinating discussion around, as I say, the backbone of how we're going to be continuing to innovate and support UK PLC. So until next week, everyone, thank you all very much once again from Protiviti and my Robert Half team here today. Extend you all our best wishes for you all. Stay safe, be bold, be kind to each other, and we look forward to seeing you all next week. Thank you all very much.